Good morning, everyone. This is Matt Sexton with the Florida Department of Transportation's CAD office. Welcome to Design Survey Orientation, part of our ongoing series of webinars on hot CAD topics. Just a reminder, there is a question and answer dialogue as part of the GoToWebinar interface. You can enter your questions and answer, well, I guess you just enter your questions. We'll enter the answers as we go along. We'll try to answer those in real time. If we don't, we'll take some time at the end to answer what questions we have. If your question does not get answered during the duration of the webinar, it will be compiled as part of a Q&A document, which will be posted along with the webinar, a recording of the webinar, on the same page that you used to register for the webinar. If you have problems with the audio at any point, the best way to solve that is to log out and log back in, as we are not really able to control anything to do with the audio. That's a GoToWebinar thing. So try that first. Without any further ado, I'll turn things over. John, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Matt. So this is design survey orientation, and I wanted you to note that the survey workflow that we use in ORD is the same in SS4 and SS10, and it's been in use for a number of years. However, there are some differences in ORDs, different tools, different quirks. The way it works is a little bit different. So this orientations is a training guide to make the users aware of settings, tools, issues that they may encounter. We'll make it available on the Q&A. I think we can post it there, and maybe with training guides. One way or another, this was a good reference for you if you're not very familiar with Open Roads Designer survey workflow and the ServRD file. So let's go ahead and move along. I've got a lot of information for you. So the ServRD, you'll find the FDOT surveying and mapping documents and publications. You'll find the survey mapping handbook and other publications. This file is used to develop all survey design models. The legacy GDDM, the DRXRD, the TopoRD, the utilities are subsets of the ServRD. So if they pass, if it passes in the survey RD, it's going to pass if these were individual files. But it is not recommended to develop these files separately from the ServRD. These standard files from SS4 can be visualized with level filters easily in ORD. Also, attachments through the attached survey. If you go into the Open Roads modelings and you look under the FDOT tabs, you'll find attached survey workflows. It will attach it as a reference, and it will automatically put these 4 files and into a reference, and it'll separate them so you can easily select what you want to see. Also, additionally, their level filters have been added to enhance this functionality. So, and we've had those in SS4 for a long time. They're still there. In this, I'm going to show you some additional ways to visualize your data. The objectives of this workflow here is, in this training guide, is to understand the ORD work sets and opening files, setting up the project geographic coordinate system, which is known, it has to be on one of 4 datums in Florida. Review survey field book and how it visualizes. I want to show you some of the survey tools. We have some new ones in ORD, and they are very handy for designers. I want to quickly go through annotate features and feature labeling. You saw labeling last week, so this is just pretty much more of the same, except for I'm not going to get into the civil labeler or any of the labeling tools specifically, other than some that show up here in the terrain models. The terrain models are portable. They I'm going to go over the create survey generated issues, properties of the terrain models, exaggeration, complex terrain models, standalones, how to analyze, and there are some new label tools for labeling a terrain model now. So the first category is ORD work sets. And I've highlighted this one because we've seen so many problems in these areas with users not quite setting up the work sets the way they should. Since 10.11 ORD 1011, you have over on the left side a custom configuration selection. So that's where we build our state kits. If you want Bentley configurations examples, that's the upper selection up here. In order to get the DOT workspace, you need to be in a custom configuration, and you'll see the DOT workspace and the work set. Never open a file in the zero work set template. It must stay clean. Never open it. And one of the things we want you to realize is that when you are in a work set, FDO Connect will create files and paths and will populate various folders with resources that you may not be aware of. If you create these files in the zero work set template, so if you just go up in there and start, I'm going to create files in zero work because it's easy, you'll end up putting those files in every work set that you create. So in other words, you've just corrupted your only work set template. Keep it clean. Never open a file in a work set template. Some more of the same. Use the drop down. Do not use the work set template. Select create work set right here and create your work set. Okay. Name your work set, and then below that is the only time you will select this zero work set template. This will build your folders, structures, and they'll all be clean, and it will populate it with the resource files it needs. If you're going to do a hands-on workshop, you can use this guide to go through some of these things. This is our training set. This is just what I recommend that you use for training. So one of the other things I get a lot of support requests on, or why aren't my features showing up? What's going on? They were there, now they're not there. It can be in many cases the way you open up your work sets, or the way the file was opened up, or where it was opened up. Possibly if it's on a server or a cloud server can really be a problem. To make sure you're opened up correctly, go to the Open Road Standards in your Explorer and make sure these files, these FDOT standards features.dgnlib and the FDOT text favorite stock text styles DGNlib. Also, those two are connected back and forth. You've got to have them for survey. Also, you should see the SU drainage and the SU utilities. So these 4 files should be in your library every time you open up a file. Okay. Update the standards from the DGN library. This is a new functionality that Bentley has put into Open Roads Designer, and what it will do is it will go to those DGN libraries I just showed you, and it will update this file. In many cases where the file seems to be a problem, where features are not showing up because somebody tried to open them without those libraries attached properly, or whatever the case. There's another case, and I'll get to that later, on settings where your point features are showing up red, which means there's a problem with the feature library, and it's a setting that situation that between versions 10.10 and 10.11 that Bentley added that can cause that problem. Using this functionality, go to your Open Road Standards, go to your file right here, right click on it, update standards for DGN library. That will take care of a lot of those issues. Okay, warning, if it's your ServRD and you're not the project surveyor, I would recommend you don't use this because you could mess up the file. Survey workflow. So this is this is something you've probably seen and know. If in open roads modeling, in open roads, you have a workflow up on the upper left. You can choose, do a drop down and choose a survey workflow if you want to see the survey tools. Many of those tools are available anywhere, anyway, somewhere else. But putting on the survey workflow will give quick access. I wanted to note the active level. When you open up a brand new file, please take note of the active level. In most of the surveys, I recommend that you put it to the baseline survey level because it will always pass in the ServRD. The reason for this is when importing files or using certain tools like the geometry builder, you can create what's called dependencies, especially if those alignments or some of the line work has curves in it, and these are models, these are featurized lines, then you can end up with dependencies, and that dependency deep down in the information of that alignment will have the active level set, and if it's set to default, it's going to fail QC. So we recommend that you keep an active level set to a level that will pass QC in that file. Linking code. So this goes on to what I mentioned a minute ago. This is a survey setting where you have to set, you want to set it depending on how you're surveying. So many of the surveyors will use, when they're the software vendors will allow you to do not just AP, but when you're creating chains or points, AP1, AP2, AP3. If you select the match start, then it will accommodate those incrementing chain features and point features. So you'll see them the way they should be. They'll turn red if it's a problem. Now this is, I'm going to get to that again in just a second. So set true to linear force to force linear features to line strings instead of B-spline curves. These are in the survey settings, which I'll show you right here. So if you go to your Open Roads standards and you dig down into the survey and you go down to survey settings, of course, all files are going to have these survey settings. Only the ServRD is going to use it. But this is under linking codes. This is where I'm talking about. Now, this used to be true false in 10.10 and below. It was a true false statement. So the problem is if you have a 10.10 or below survey and you bring it forward into 10.12 or 10.11, it's going to have a problem reading your features because they didn't have a direct conversion from true false to the possibilities. There's about 4 or 5 possibilities now. We recommend you put match start right here, so it will accommodate your features, your incrementing features, and we also recommend that you put this linear feature force curves to line strings to true. This will avoid B-splines in the file, and those cause problems, especially with quantities. Okay. And remember to save your settings. So when you change these, save settings, and you can do it up here right at the top, or you can go to the file and go to the backstage and save settings there. Okay. I'm going to move over to geographic coordinate systems. So a word on that. I won't get real deep in it, but there are quite a few slides. There's a lot to this. So I want everybody to understand that every design survey is accompanied by a survey report as per Rule Chapter 5J17 of the Florida Administrative Code. Every survey report states the project horizontal and vertical datum set in the digital survey. Okay, they need to match. They must match. Okay, almost all FDOT modern surveys are done on NAD 83 2011. our FPRN is on 2011. The vertical is always NAVD 88 now. And when you apply a geoid 18 to the ellipsoid heights derived from the FPR results, your elevation will be an NAVD 88 elevation. Now, that's stated right in the NGS website, the NGS NOAA website on geoids and how they work. So, and I have a link in here that'll show you, you can learn more about those. So selecting the datum in the survey report, you want to go to FDO Connect 10.12 will automatically set the geographic coordinate systems to NAD 83 2011. So our 2011 is our datum of choice, and we really should be doing all surveys on 2011. All design should also be done on 2011. So the quick choose functionality that you had when you create a file and you choose the county is now going to say NAD 2011 north, west, or east zones. So if the selected projection does not match the survey report, then you have to go into the coordinate system and manually select from the library of projections. The survey data and any other geographically located survey file must match the projection in the survey report. Changing datums for design purposes, the original survey and report must stand on its own. If the same survey is needed on a different datum, then the project surveyor should reproject the ORD elements to the desired datum and update the survey report if that's if that's where they're going to go. We do not recommend this. These datum changes are not exact, and even NGS, who wrote the NCAP program, will tell you they're not exact, and even theirs is not exact. There's going to be some slop. So I put a warning down here. Reprojecting ORD elements will change all coordinates in the file to the selected projection. So don't do it. Only your surveyor should do this, and we don't recommend the surveyor does it either. An alternative to changing the datum for the design purposes, and this is use caution because it slows the file and loading, is ORD will reference a file with a different datum into the active file using the geographic coordinate systems of the active file, which means it looks at the two files and it knows there's a different, and when it references it in, it will reproject it to the new system. It'll actually give you a chance to select the datum or the reproject, where the reproject or not. But usually there's in ORD, there's now, when you select reference, there will be a pull down that'll say recommended. And if you choose that, you almost can't go wrong, okay? Because it's going to put it, either they're going to match the datums or it's going to reproject it to the datum of the design itself. So other methods of referencing file will not attempt to reproject the survey file. This is really important to understand because this is where we could have problems. Between NAD and 83 and 2011, you could see as much as a foot, a couple of tenths, even up to almost 2 feet in some situations. Usually around a foot or maybe a little less would be and you will see that, okay? Selecting the datum in the survey report. If the geographic coordinate system projection is wrong or set to none, then you have to manually go into the library, which is right here, okay? You'll pull up the library, you'll go to projected northing down to North America, dig down to the United States, then you'll go all the way, drill down into Florida, and then you will choose the projection. So you can pick the appropriate projection on the appropriate datum. So you can see right here that NAD 83 2011, NSRS, which is National Satellite Reference System, will be on 2011 Florida East Zone US foot, or North Zone, which I'm using right here, US foot, or the West Zone. So those are your zones that you're going to pick. Typically, you've had them here. We don't want to put them there anymore, okay? And you can right click to add this favorites to your toolbar right up here. So you can go up to favorites and it'll be a quick pick, okay? Only use the datum stated in the survey report if the geographic coordinate system is in a file does not match survey report, then correct the coordinate system setting, which will not change the coordinate values. Do not reproject. Okay, just remember, do not reproject. Okay, that's a no-no. Only the project surveyor should ever permanently reproject data, which will always change the coordinate values. Referencing a design survey. So verify the datums are the same for the active and the reference files. To reference the survey into a design file for production purposes, use the recommended when you see the pull down. Do not use the AEC, that's the architecture, engineering, and construction. After studying this closely, it is only for small areas. Bentley recommends only something less than 1 kilometer, and you can match up this datum with the survey pretty easily. Do not use the reproject unless you are sure the datum difference and reprojection is necessary. This is when you're referencing, okay? And this is what it'll look like. So when you go to do that attachment method and you go to coincident whirl, you'll see that at the top. Was the choice that was there. So I did the drop down. You'll see recommended. That will be about the same as interactive coincident or coincident whirl in this case. Reprojection will down here. If you reprojected it, it will reproject it. Now, if you are on the same datum and you choose reprojected, it's not going to do anything. What will happen is it will reference the file. You can go down and look under georeference down here in the bottom right, select your file and do the drop down, and you will see these are the only choices you'll see. It's either not been reprojected, or it's using the ACE transform, which we do not, or it's going to be reprojected. No should be most of the time. Only if there's a problem, really, will you end up using reprojection. Okay. The vertical datum is for the projection is NAD 8386 or for NAD 8386, HARN 2007 or 2011. It will automatically set the vertical datum to NAVD 88. And just note that HARN is the choice in Bentley. That projection was renamed not long after the 8390 projection they call them realizations. So once the 8390 realization happened, they changed the name from HARN to 8390. So if you have an 8390 project, you want to choose HARN. The reason, there's some reasoning behind why NGS did this, but and there's some reasoning I think behind why Bentley did it also, is as to not have some confusing datums. So they just used the old name nomenclature, which is HARN. If you want to look at the vertical datum, you'll need to go over to the left to the details, and you can go down to the bottom once it opens up and see North America vertical datum of 88. You have your choices down there. You can change it to 29 if that is your project is on 29. You also you can change it to the ellipsoid or geoid height if that is where your datum is. Of course, geoid will be North American datum of 88 because we're using geoid 18. Okay. More on horizontal datums can be found on NOAA's NOS VDatum site. A tutorial on datums is a really good one. It doesn't take long to go through this. It'll help. I highly recommend you do it. NGS also has more on the 2011 datum right here. Applying the geoid 18, as I said, to NGS ellipsoid heights from the FPRN will render NAVD 88 elevations, so we're good there. And then if you want to know more about geoids and how they affect the ellipsoid height and move it over to NAVD 88, you can check this, click on this link. Now, survey field book. There are some things that you need to know about the survey field book if you're not aware of them. They're mostly the same in SS10, but there are a few little quirks. So when you look at the field book, if you go to survey, you can drill down to the field book. You can see all point features and all linear features. In this case, I've drilled down into the linear features and chosen AP. If you select that AP or you select point features at the top or linear features at the top, you can go, you can select all the points or linear or pick a specific feature to show details. Okay, so in this case, I picked a specific feature, AP. If you go down, if you go to the survey workflow, go into the field book tab and look at details right there. Under AP, from selecting this, you're going to end up with a show details box, and it's going to have either all the chains of that category. So you see all the chains right here. You got EP1, 2, JH, 12, 13, 14, 15. And you can see from where this little bar is, there's a lot of chains under AP, individual chains. You can, this first column in this survey details has right-click functionality. So if you can make a selection, you can use your shift and select a lot of points or a lot of chains, or you can use your control and select individual ones, multiple chains. And once you right-click in this column, you're going to see this drop down. You can edit those chains in various ways. You can change the feature definition, for instance. You can view them right here. You can zoom right to that point or chain or group. You can make a selection set out of those points. So I think design usually finds it handy to select, for instance, go to your field book, go back up to your field book, drop down your points, go down all the way down to like single support signs. You can select all the single support signs. Just hold down your shift, get them all, and you can do a report on those selected items. And once you have that report up, you can move those into a Word document or into a text file or XML. There's a lot you can do with these in order to put them in tables, like an Excel table, for tracking purposes. Okay. Visualize desired features is a functionality of the field book, and it's the same as in SS10. I recommend that you go up to the default right here and uncheck it so everything will clear out that's in the field book. Then you can go down to the field book and select just the AP points, or AP chains in this case, if that's what you want to see, or just points. Okay, so that's how you can just visualize. You just expand the data to segregate survey data, uncheck the default to turn it all off, check the desired feature to visualize, and also do that opposite to turn everything back on. Go uncheck the default and check it, then check it back on, and we'll revisualize everything. As you move down the survey data, you'll see there are filters. Okay, ORD survey filters can be used to visualize the survey data by attributes, and that's including but not limited to field code, DTM attribute, zone, or a combination of attributes. If you look right here above the pavement, there's ground. That's a case where the filter will filter out the attributes and the ground type features to build a ground DT or ground terrain model. Okay? Or you can just select to see or view, for instance, AP, shoulders, and driveways. So there's various ways to visualize these by the survey from the survey field book. All elements can be visualized with level filters, as also was in the SS10. For instance, you can do the drainage. There's the GDTM, RD, and then on down the list, you'll see the Topo RD and the UTEX. Also, if you continue down these filters, you're going to see some other filters that may be very handy for you. You can just show just existing curb and gutter, flow lines, and then a lot of different labels, survey labels. Find it kind of handy to turn these on and off so you can put them on the right levels. Okay. Also, you've got existent pavement and existent pavement markings. So selecting these together will, for instance, you could select curb and gutter, pavement, and pavement markings, and you'll see all the pavement and the curb and markings. You can turn off the markings if you just want to see what you're going to be extracting from existing features. The field book is portable. There is a tool in ORD called the Bentley Survey Field Book. It's a .sqlite file, so it's a SQL database light, and it will, unlike the XML, the SQLite will accommodate linking codes and DTM attributes and some of the other things that get lost in the if you're trying to just use a land XML to pass around the field book. Survey tools. Okay, so one of the first tools you'll see in ORD on the Home tab that's very useful. As you go across over here under Model, Analyzing, and Reporting, you're going to see the Civil Analysis Analyze Point tool. Okay, so when you drop this down, you'll see Analyze Point and choose it, and that is a quick and easy way to have a heads-up display for alignments of station offsets or elevations to any point or any feature in the file in the ServRD. Okay. Measure tools, ORD has measure tools have been upgraded. They're easier to use. They're better for analysis. So your angle measure, for instance, does a really nice job of showing you exactly where you are when you're measuring. Sometimes it's hard to tell what you've clicked. The measure tools are really much better than they were in SS10. Okay, the edit linear features chains is something that was in SS10. It hasn't changed. You do have an edit tab for going straight to those now, but you also have the right click functionality to edit chains. ORD geometry tools are available. I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole because this would take more than one webinar to do, but just be aware these some of the main tools are the civil AccuDraw. You've got points and the modifiers and the complex geometries are there. You're going to need those for chains, for stationing, etc. So a lot of these other tools design will use. These highlighted ones are more for the surveyors. Okay. The geometry tools also, if I dig down into them a little bit more, you see there's a locate point that geometry tool, which works almost exactly like the GeoPack drop down locate tool. Okay, it's very similar. You'll recognize them. The geometry builder and the geometry connector are right here, and then under the modify, that's where you'll find the geometry editor. Both of those have been upgraded in ORD 10.12. Previously, the geometry builder would be the only one where you could save the geometry into an XML, not a land XML, just an XML file. Now you can do that in the geometry editor. Okay. Right here, you can see it right here, geometry builder edit. Okay. So moving on to annotate the survey. Okay. Point decorations are a big difference in ORD. So if you go into your survey workflow and you drop down to the survey tab, and you'll see analyze right here. Over on the right, this is how they call them point decorations, meaning your point, your description, and your elevation, setups and observations. You're probably not going to care about too much. Field codes, those are usually pretty obvious, but the names, the elevation, the description are commonly used. This is where you do it. In SS4, we had to use point decorations, but we had to use a level, text on a level to do that. Those still exist, however, they're not for labeling. In fact, they will not pass QC in many of these other files like the drainage and utilities and topo files. It's not going, they're not for that purpose, for use in those purposes, not for labeling. Okay. RD, ServRD annotate features works pretty much. Most of you probably know what this is. You select the element, you select annotate element, and you hit reset in order to edit. It'll put, for instance, this asphalt or condition of this single support stop sign right there. You turn off own these annotations right here. So if it's a survey field book annotation, it will not affect any other annotations except for those survey field book annotations. It's just a toggle on and off. Okay. Now I want to get down to terrain models, and I'm going to spend a little more time on this because there is some game changers going on in terrain models. Previously in ORD versions, survey terrain models, you build a survey generated terrain model from the field book. That's very standard. Then you would have to deactivate the survey processing to edit the model. So any terrain model, any edits like swapping vertexes, or changing or moving vertexes, or deleting them, or swapping lines for the triangles, or deleting lines of the triangles, had to be done with this deactivate the survey processing, had to be off. When you turned it back on, it would undo your changes. So you couldn't turn it back off. You couldn't turn it back on. You turn it off, you make your edits, you could not turn it back on without undoing those edits. Okay, so Bentley, the way we got around that, Bentley recommended exporting the terrain model as a 10 and importing that 10 back into the ServRD to disassociate the terrain model from the field book. So if you're in an intersection and you build a terrain model around that intersection and you're happy with it, and then you go to the next and you edit triangles, and then you go to the next intersection and you build a terrain model there, you have to activate the survey processing, which would undo your edits from the previous terrain model. That's why you would need to export it as 10 and make it a standard only. The only other way to do that would be to build both of them simultaneously, or if you had many intersections, to build them all simultaneously and then edit them all. And we did see a lot of that. So building a standalone was one way to get around that, especially in situations where you don't know if the limits of the project are going to expand, and they frequently do. Okay. So this process is done to accommodate multiple terrain models. Activate survey processing to create another survey generated terrain model for editing. So here's where the game changers comes in. 10.12, which is our latest version of ORD, it is no longer necessary to deactivate survey processing to edit the model. So you may edit when processing is active or inactive. It doesn't matter now. Edits will hold even when turning on and off the processing. So it's really important to know the difference between 10.10 and 10.11 and then 10.12. Okay. So you also may now delete interior triangles to create holes. You could not do that before. Only exterior triangles could be deleted. You must have processing on, however, to create a new terrain model. This new functionality eliminates the need to create standalone terrain models for separate areas. Although it's not necessarily a bad idea if you're happy with your terrain model and you want to pretty much seal it up in concrete and say, okay, this is never going to change, then you might want to move it to a standalone, which also will help later if it expands. You can merge terrain models pretty easily. Okay. Right click on the default to turn on and off terrain model processing is where it happens. So you go up to the default in the survey tab, you right click, you deactivate the survey processing. The editor is here. Edit tools will now work when the survey processing is active. Okay. It wouldn't do that before this latest release that we have not released yet in September or end of September. Use field book filters to visualize the appropriate elements for selection. Okay, so when you go to create a terrain model, you can create a selection set. You can use the GDDM, DTM ground filter in the survey field books. You can also, you could use or for the bridge or superstructures, there's one for that. Create a selection set. And then once you go up to the field book itself, right here, you can right click and it says terrain, create terrain model from selection set. You can't just select it. Before you actually right click, you have to hold down the control key before right click on the word field books. If you don't, it will deselect your selection set. Okay. Create the terrain model from the field book. So alternatively from creating a selection set to create the terrain model, you can create a terrain model directly from the field book. The selection set works better if you have multiple field books, or if you want to keep that area down, you just don't want to go into the entire, like for instance, say an intersection. You don't want to use it, create it from the entire field book, because you're going to end up with a bunch of intersections with a boundary between them, which is going to be a mess. Okay, so selection set is the way to go in that case. You can create terrain models from TINs and land XMLs that have previously been exported. Okay, so again, make sure your home tab active level is set to something that will pass the QC, or you may end up with a dependency that fails QC in your terrain model. Terrain model properties. So once you've created that terrain model and you select it, you can go over to properties and look at it, and you will see what's in it. If in this case we have a boundary, we have break lines, we have spot shots, holes, imported contours is a possibility, and of course you have islands and voids. Selecting these will show if they're in there. So you can see down in the source display, they're off. They're usually off. In this case, I've got the boundary is always on. That's why you see it without triangles. If triangles are turned off, you still see the boundary. So it's by default it's on. So break lines, boundaries, holes, voids, and spot shots can be visualized. It will look something like this. These are some spot shots that have been visualized, and it shows break lines right here, but these are just spot shots. But you can see break lines on and boundary on down here, voids on, and it'll show up like there's a void right here, and it'll show up, and they will be white and they will be featureless, but they are 3D, which brings up a situation where you may have a topo file which is 2D and you need 3D features, but you don't want to send the survey crews back out, but you do have a terrain model. The 10 that was created previously could have break lines and points in it. If it does have break lines, you can actually visualize those break lines and bring them into the file. They won't be on the right features, but you can do that too. If push comes to shove, it's probably easier that than sending a crew back out to collect this stuff. Okay, so you could have a tech go in and refeaturize break lines and add them to the file in order to use them in your cross sections, etc. Terrain. This is what a terrain model looks like without a break line. No break lines. You got your edges of your pavement are all squiggly. This is a 10 that was created from vertexes, and it did not have break lines. Adding break lines in, it's going to look something like this. It's going to be much straighter. This is a huge difference. You can exaggerate terrain models. In ORD, keyed to the alternate F3 button on your keyboard, if you hit that in your serve RD file, it's going to create a separate design file model. Also, if you're on some laptops, you have to hold the function key down for this to work. Open terrain models in a separate design file model, okay? And then you can select the exaggeration scale, click on the exaggeration button, select a point on the screen to exaggerate it, or you can key in, if you want to key in from a specific like elevation to see heights and differences, you can put key in XY000, for instance, to do that. Once you've exaggerated it, you can see this is this is our terrain model from the training set, which is down in Wakulla County, and it's very flat down in here, but you can see how much exaggerating by 10 did it to the roadway area. So any problems, any true holes or issues, spikes, or you can exaggerate them and really see the problems. Okay, there's a void area right there. What happens is you're in the default model. When you hit that exaggerate, it's going to create this 3D temporary visualization right here, and it says temporary mode for visualizing only. And once you hit this X and close the exaggeration, it will close this model and you'll be back on the default. A word about complex terrain models. So I didn't show one here, but you can kind of imagine that complex terrain models may be created when terrain models either are adjacent or overlapping. Okay. Um, a complex terrain model to standalone terrain models is also something we normally did with the new survey processing. Being able to edit them with survey processing on, it's probably not as critical, but it can make sense in some situations. When all edits are done, you can export the complex terrain model to a GeoPack 10. Then you can delete all those complex terrain models, and it could be quite a few that get put together into it. It really can get somewhat confusing. And then you can just import that GeoPack 10 back in as a standalone terrain model. And these GeoPack 10s, when Bentley recommends using a GeoPack 10 as opposed to a Land XML, and I have done both. I don't see hardly any differences in the line, for instance, the swapping of triangles, but the 10 they claim does a little bit better. So we do recommend using a 10 to go back and forth with terrain models. This is a situation where you have multiple terrain models. They and made them stand alone for 3D modeling. So again, you had to make them. You just almost had to, unless you wanted to edit them all at the same time. They need to be separate. They should not have a boundary connecting. Many times we've seen where there's a little boundary that connects it. It's just a little green line, a couple of green lines here to here, couple to here. It's going to connect up somewhere to this one, and then another little boundary. And then if you select it, it's all one big terrain model with the small little lines in between. That is a problem. Do not do that. We've talked to Bentley extensively about this issue and this situation. Designers seem to like to have the terrain model all in one. I'm telling you, you don't need that, and it's actually contrary to the workflow, and it causes problems down the line. For instance, if I wanted to come in and supplement these intersections by running some topo in between, which a survey crew could easily do without having to resurvey the entire intersection, they could come in and they could fill in, and you could make a single terrain model out of all of this, and it would be good. However, if these have boundaries between them, that is a problem. You're not going to be able to fill in. You will have to break them up and start recreating these terrain models, sometimes from scratch. So we do not recommend you ever connect separate models. And on top of that, they're not correct. You actually have triangles connecting the two, and they mean nothing. So they're really not even correct if you do that. Okay. Some more of the tools. The analyze point that I mentioned before at the home tab, right when you open up and you go over here to civil analysis, that same analyze point tool works great on terrain models. You have it's a heads up display dynamic tool, so it's not for placing. You can place a little bit, but it's not for placing text or doing it. It's just a heads up analyzation tool. It will give you elevations at any point on that terrain model. Okay. In this case, I've compared the elevation 33.04 to a point feature, which is 33.2. So you see there's right at that point, there's about a tenth, almost, tenth and a half, 1500ths of difference. Okay. Just for that particular point. And you can, of course, you can see here some of the visualizations that were used to show the survey itself in the field book. So, okay, so we also have another new tool. It's labeled terrain models with elevations. Okay, so if you look over here, if you go to the terrain model and you go to the far right, you've got, or you do have a label terrain contours there, but you got a label terrain spots. So you can, once you select this, you can select a spot. It is giving you the elevation of the terrain model. Like for instance, this one right here, this 40.9187 of this check section. You see, it's a check section point, a cross section point that was not included terrain model, so you can compare the terrain model against the check section. In this case, it's 40.918, which 87, which rounds up to 919. Just remember that 40.919 for a moment. For that particular point, this is the terrain model elevation, not the point elevation. Okay, when you use this tool, you can create an analyze elevation report from so you can create a selection set out of the points to be analyzed. You can use the analyze elevation tool to create the point terrain model comparison report. So in the case of what I do, if you look under terrain right here and you go over to points, you can drop down, you have analyze elevation. It will analyze, it will ask you to select points, and you select the terrain model, and what you'll end up with is you'll want to go in here and select some points. Now in this case, I just selected like three or four of these check section points, and I'm going to compare those against the terrain model spot shots that I labeled earlier. So analyze elevation will make a report that will show the difference between the points and select the terrain model. Then it doesn't have to be a check section point, it can be any point. So you can select a point and then compare it against the terrain model. Very easy way to do that. I know design must do that all the time. Pavement tolerances are usually set to about 0.5 feet. Natural ground is around 0.01. So when you select that analyze report, it's going to ask you for a tolerance. Selection sets can be made on screen or from the survey details dialog box. For instance, I could go back to the survey field book and select and go and drill down into points, drill all the way down to the cross section features, the point features, and I would have the details showing just those cross section points, those check section points. I could select them all or just select some of them. Usually you want to kind of look at a one cross section at a time. So you would select those points either manually or in that details dialog box. And then once you've done that and set the tolerance, it's going to generate a report. Okay. So that report's going to look something like this. If you remember, I said 40.919. There it is. This is the elevation of that point. The elevation of the check section point was 40.9. So there is a 0.19 difference, and it's negative, so it's below. It's going to give you that tolerance that's within the tolerance or outside the tolerance. In this case, this one was the tolerance set at 500, so it's about 300 outside the tolerance. And then you see some here that are within. Okay, one of them was 0 exactly. Okay. Then there's a summary box down here at the bottom where it'll tell you everything in the report. Remember, this report can be exported to Word, Excel, text file, and used for that purposes. So that pretty much covers the tools and that I wanted to show and get you oriented on the survey, on the ServRD file. If you have any questions, please, I'm gonna spend some time now. I'm gonna go ahead. This is the end of it. You can direct questions to cad.support@dot.state.fl.us. I want to spend a minute looking through questions and answers. I don't know, Matt, do you see anything that you didn't answer, or you could that I need to look at? I hadn't had a chance to look at them.
It looks like we've got most of the questions answered. Only had a handful of questions, so
Okay. If you do, what I would, this is a good, this is good. This PDF, I'm going to create it. Did you do that? Have you linked it in yet? Or are you going to do that after? I think what happens is they do post the webinar and they post the question and answers. And in the question and answers, we can put a link to this PDF. Also, possibly we could put it on under training guides.
this is actually going to be posted on the same page where everyone registered. It's the same place we've been posting the recordings of
Okay.
the webinars. So we'll
Okay.
post the recording as well as the Q&A and the copy of the presentation.
That'd be great. All right. Well, we're just finishing just a few minutes early. Anybody else got any questions? It's push it out there. Let's see. Where can I find a copy of the presentation? We just answered that. We're going to post it. Okay. And so that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attendance, and I hope you get something out of this. That's it.
All righty. Thank you all so much for attending and spending your morning with us. We'll have another webinar in 2 weeks.